Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take on Trump denying New York, Seattle, and Portland federal funds. But people, experts, the experts that the media uses to frame things. Oh, they say he can't do that. I find that hard to believe. Now, understand the deal here. These cities always run deep in the red. Philadelphia, every year, announces they don't have enough money, they can't fund their schools, and they end up going right to the state for tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions. It's ridiculous. Every year they cut back, every year they close and consolidate schools in an attempt to mitigate some of the damage. But ultimately, these cities are so poorly run. They have these high costs, right? All their government workers are paid top dollar and they get pensions and benefits. Now, I'm not saying those are bad things, but if you can't afford them, you can't afford them, right? I mean, if you run a business and you decide, let's say you run a coffee shop and you decide to give your waitresses, 30, 40, $50,000 a year plus a pension plus full benefits, that's a lot of money to put out for employees. And if they can retire in 20 years and you still have the coffee shop, then you'll be paying them and the new employees. That's a real problem with some of these city governments. They have people who retire with golden parachutes. They're not millionaires, but they're making 100K on their pension. After they serve 20 years, 25 years, whatever it is, they go off and retire and they lead a pretty well-to-do middle-class lifestyle. Not that they're mega rich. They can do whatever they want. They're making 100K. You're making 100K a year, you're pretty well off. I mean, that's no chump change. I'd like to make 100K a year. Give that to me. I could live on half of that, no problem. Most people could. But, these cities pay out this enormous amounts of money and benefits. And then they got to pay new people. I mean, they're paying these people until they die, essentially. That's a lot of money. And they just don't care because they're not paying for it. It's not coming out of the pockets of anybody who actually runs the cities. And if they get into trouble, they go to the state. And if state gets into trouble, they go to the federal government. So guess who's on the hook for it? You, me, everybody else. So we're not only paying, if you live in a city, the taxes there, which are enormous, you're probably paying for the cities that are already in your state through state tax. And then you're probably paying more on top of that through the federal government as they pay the state, and that trickles down to the cities again because they just lose money. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, for example, I know that one best because every year, they seem not to be able to fund their school system, but then 6 months later they're talking about, oh, we've opened this plaza up near City Hall with all these amenities, and we're going to have a Christmas tree lighting ceremony. We're going to have this and that. And you just think to yourself, well, wait a minute. If you're broke, why are you doing all this? How does this offset the cost of even just doing that? Like they set up an ice skating rink in near City Hall for Christmas and a bunch of other stuff, right? Are they paying for that, the rink and everything that goes on there, and then making enough money that it's like, well, this didn't cost us anything? Or is that just costing the city more money because they gotta pay electricity and permits and they gotta have police presence there to make sure nothing happens, and on and on and on? That's the real question. I don't think there's a real answer because they make a budget and they include fancy things like that on top of the schools, and then they go, oh, we don't have enough money. Well, maybe you should cut all that fancy stuff out first, and then think about cutting back on the benefits and pay that some of these union workers are getting, because it's a lot of money. I mean, and think about what the negotiation process must be. You know, if you run a company and you negotiate with a union, you're negotiating because you're trying to keep money in your own pocket, in the company pocket, because that helps you. But if you run a city and you're negotiating for a union contract, you're not really negotiating for the money. The money is superfluous. It's not your money. Who cares? At the end of the day, if you end up borrowing the money, or the state gives you the money, or the federal government gives you the money, who cares? As long as you look good as a politician, your problems are solved. And that's the problem. So Trump is trying to, sorry, that was a long-winded wind-up, but Trump is basically going to deny New York, Seattle, and Portland, and some of these other riot cities federal funds until they clean up their act. As well he should. You know, as a libertarian, this is just music to my ears. Now, this article says he can't really do that. There's a process. There are laws on the books. He can't just arbitrarily decide that based on criteria he made up. And that part is probably true to a degree. I mean, executive orders can give presidents a lot of leeway, and really it's more Congress. But I think what this is Trump sort of setting the stage for a future court battle, right? So if they get jammed up, now, you know, if this takes 3 or 4 years in the courts, those cities won't get their money for 3 or 4 years. They'll fall to pieces without that money. I mean, you know, if Philadelphia couldn't borrow money from the state or the federal government, they'd have to, like, I don't know what they'd do. They'd certainly have to cut a lot of unnecessary stuff just to get by, and then stuff that they really don't want to cut, like trash pickup or something. Then that would have repercussions all around. Now, Tim Pool did a piece on this, and his point was, well, you know, Biden is saying he's cutting the police, and that's technically true, and this would, like, make things worse for those cities. But those cities are not cooperating with anything. The people who are running these cities aren't cooperating. In my view, they're not. If you're going to tell the federal government to go pound sand, then why should the federal government give you a dime? If you got riots in your city and you don't handle them, because really, let's be honest, the reason they're not handling them has nothing to do with their alternative policing methods, and has everything to do with, well, we're politically aligned with these people to a, you know, small degree, and we feel this is going to hurt Trump, so we're going to allow it to happen. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You're holding people hostage. It shouldn't be legal. What these cities have done is criminal, in my view. I think what Bill de Blasio, Ted Wheeler, and Jenny Durkin have done, I think it's criminal. I think they should be investigated and prosecuted. I don't know if that'll happen. That's probably, maybe this is a precursor to that. I keep my fingers crossed and hope the FBI has a corruption probe in all these cities, because I think it really needs to happen. I think these cities, these local governments, are very corrupt, and they need to be weeded out. You know, it's one thing to disagree with Trump and even be incredibly outspoken by him. It's another thing to destroy your own city just to score a few national political points for your, you know, for your buddy Biden. I mean, that's just wrong. If that's not illegal, it certainly should be. I support this 100%. These cities are not, they're not calling in the feds when they have a riot. People are dying. Lives are being destroyed. Businesses are being destroyed. And these people know it. And they think, well, we'll just get some more money. We'll get some more money down the road. And I'll at least be able to say I got us more money. that that ain't cool at all. I don't want to pay for your effing riot. It's your fault there was a riot. You let it get worse. I don't want to pay for that. Somebody's got to be held accountable for these riots. If you're not going to hold the people rioting, you should be held accountable, mayors, and some of the people directly beneath you, your city councils and whatnot. You're running the city into the ground. And these people will essentially just leave the city and go run for other office, or they're already rich, so they'll go off and be rich somewhere, I assume. Meanwhile, their city will just fall apart. I don't know what happened to... It'd be interesting to look at the rich people of Detroit and now how they handle it. Did they leave the city when it fell apart, or did they tough it out because they were insulated from all the nonsense that was going on around them? Are they still there? I don't know. I kind of would think no, but I don't really know Detroit. Maybe some of you out there know Detroit. Is there still like rich neighborhoods there that are even richer now because they're like the last vestige of the nobility who stayed behind while the peasants all left? Is it something like that, or did they all leave? Because it seems to me that the rich people are leaving these cities. They're leaving San Francisco and New York, certainly. Definitely Minneapolis. I mean, I think everybody's leaving Minneapolis. And Portland, too. I mean, how are you going to run a business there with all this nonsense going on? And I think there has to be some sort of political reckoning here. I think that will happen November 3rd. I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats just ousted from office. Maybe even some relatively good ones, simply because the Democratic Party as a brand has become so terribly tainted by all this. There's just no upside to doing this. And the Democrats could have put down the riots and focused on something else to get at Trump, but this was more than this was just more than anything I've ever seen. Jones very upset. So, kudos to Trump. Take away all their money. Cut them off until they get their act together. It seems like a common sense thing. Why should we pay for this? Tell me in the comments what you think. All right, next video, Joan.